Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Toilets to Titles. My name is Justin Stevens, and we are back with another redraft rankings consensus breakdown. We're going over our list. We're to the wide receiver 11. So tonight we're going to be talking about the back end, those last two spots of our wide receiver ones, and hopefully get through all of our wide receiver twos, if not at least most of them. But I got my man Mark with me again tonight to help break this down. And Mark, before we do the breakdowns, I want to announce too that tonight we're going to be announcing three of the new monster cards. Kind of excited about that. What do you think, man?
Oh yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, yeah. Now I just surprised you with this too, like
You
20
did.
minutes ago. So like,
You
uh,
did.
so this is like a legit reaction from you. So that's what I love about it. You've had time to look at them. You haven't really had time to process it yet.
Exactly.
Um, so Coach and I, even though Coach has been taking some time off, he and I have still been in the lab doing some work with the Frankenstank. Got a lot going on with it. There is one huge announcement that's going to be coming later on down the road that I don't think Mark even knows about, or most of the team. I don't think anybody else in the team really, other than myself, maybe one or two other guys. But anyway, this one's going to be massive. It's a big announcement. It's going to come in a few weeks as we get closer to Canton. Um, but um, but yeah, anyway, that's the Frankenstank Listeners League. If you guys want information on the Frankenstank Listener League, then reach out to us. That's at JustinFF_ or at Toilets to Titles or at Coach Sheps. And DM us. Let us know that you're interested in the $25 Listener League, the Frankenstank Listener League, where most likely Freddie Krueger is going to get drafted before Pat Mahomes. That's just the way this league works. Um, Anyhow, this is not necessarily a Frankenstank episode. We just occasionally like to drop some teasers and some rule changes here and there as the offseason goes. But this is episode 228, redraft ranking wide receivers part due. All right. Let's see. First off, let's hit the news. Let's hit everything in the most recent news. Mark, you wrote down number one here. Actually, you wrote down the first two here. So why don't you go over the CMC and the IU situations out there in San Francisco real quick?
Yeah, so McCaffrey gets a nice little extension, 2 years, $38 million. Meanwhile, Ayuk is a no-show to a mandatory minicamp where starting today he can be fined $104,000 each day he doesn't show up.
Yeah, that's big, but at the same time, almost kind of expected. Like it's been kind of rough waters out there in San Francisco all off season, and Ayuk has kind of always along the way been expected to probably be a candidate to be traded. Um, but here we are. We're only a couple of months away from the big dance, and there's still no trade. There's still no talks of contract extension or anything like that. So kind of still in limbo. I mean, San Francisco gets a few $100,000 here to put towards his next contract extension. Maybe, who knows?
Right?
But that contract extension with CMC, the only thing that I kind of question is why is it only 2 years? But at the same time, if you're CMC, you probably kind of want it to only be 2 years. Get that big money up front now while you're still young, and then if you might still have enough left in the tank after 2 years to be able to get another big contract. So more power to you. It's not something that we see a lot with the running back position. So good on you. Before I go over the rest of the news here, I did forget to hit this commercial right quick. So here is our man Wicked.
Are you ready to take over your fantasy leagues and become a champion? Get the edge you need and join the Toilets to Titles Patreon today to get exclusive access to our T2T staff, weekly waiver wire shows, and Patreon exclusive leagues like our signature Frankenstank League. Members enjoy other amazing benefits such as monthly giveaways featuring autographed jerseys, collectibles, Yeti coolers, and more. Sign up now for as little as $9.99 per month and dominate your fantasy leagues like never before. Visit patreon.com/toilets to titles and let us help take your teams to the championship this season.
All right, CD Lamb is also sitting out until he CDs millions. All right, so I don't blame him either. And you and I were talking, Mark, before the show about the big Justin Jefferson contract extension, 4 years, $140 million, and we were talking about how all these wide receivers are going to want more money than that, most likely, because it always wants to go up, but it's going to be hard to find receivers that are worthy of it. I can't believe we had CD as our number 3 in the news. And it still didn't dawn on me. If anybody's gonna make it happen, it might be CD Lamb, right?
Yeah. So also, like we were talking about, not only is it finding a receiver who's as good as Justin Jefferson, but you also have to, like, these teams that are paying their quarterback as well, it's going to be hard to put that kind of money up. Justin Jefferson's got a rookie quarterback now. They have no money allocated at that position. So
right.
Somebody like CD who's got Dak there, or Chase who's got Burrow, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So aside from CD, there might not be another big, huge signing like that at that position for some time. Let's see. All right. So this one was funny when I read it, and we even talked about it before the show, and I'm still laughing. Go ahead and read off number 4 there.
So the head coach of the Titans has said that Treylon Burks will need to be an active part of special teams to justify having a game day roster spot. It's just amazing to me how far he's fell. And I know it doesn't really apply to anything redraft-wise because we're not really looking at him. But like you mentioned off air, there are people still holding on to him in Dynasty, hoping. I don't know.
Yeah.
A little scary now.
Yeah, it's even if you're holding on for dear life in Dynasty, it might be time to let go. Especially since a lot of times in most leagues, those return yards count towards nothing for fantasy, and he's trying to get those return yards just to stay on the team.
Yeah.
All right, and then the last bit of news. This is great news. This is big news. This is huge news for fantasy purposes. If this is a legit thing, Bijan is telling the media, he's telling the world that the plan is to use him kind of like they use CMC out there in San Francisco. And what he means by that is they plan on making him the focal point of the offense. They plan on making him an every down back, and they plan on letting him run the ball and work out of the outfield and in the slot, out at wide receiver. Like, they want to use him everywhere, kind of like CMC is used in San Francisco. I'm not saying he's not capable of it. I'm saying he might actually be capable of it. What I am saying is I have the 102 in my main home league redraft, and up until this news broke, Breece Hall was my number 2. He was the guy I was going to take after CMC went off the board in my home league redraft league. This kind of makes me think this puts me in a tough spot because we don't do tradings, any kind of trades during the draft, so I can't trade back to 3 and take who's left. I'm stuck with this big decision. So with this late news, what does this do for your redraft rankings between Bijan and Hall?
I still got Hall.
You still got him.
I still got Hall. I mean, the other thing is the Jets have Aaron Rodgers there, tail end of his career, wants to stay healthy. They're going to run the ball. And I feel like with Kirk Cousins there, Atlanta has a lot more options to use. They're going to use Bijan a lot. The other thing I want to know, did Bijan say that after or before CMC's contract extension? Because maybe he saw $8 million and he was like, hey, sign me up. I'll do that workload.
No, I mean, he said that that's the plan. Like he was implying that this is what the team is planning. So first off, dude, shut your mouth. Let's as a team, let's keep that to ourselves. But
right.
But hey, I appreciate it as a fantasy guy. We love you, Bijan. We love all the news. Give it all to us. But no, man, that's just it's kind of crazy to me. It's got me thinking. But I feel you, and I agree with you. And also Aaron Rodgers those last couple of years with the Packers was a dump off monster. And we've seen it with Breece. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. So
100%.
Very interesting. But obviously this isn't a running back episode. It's a wide receiver episode. Let me drop the announcement for the first new monster card for the 2024 Frankenstank season 5 for Frankenstank. and that is Ghostface from the movie Scream. This card was actually created by Coach's son Emmett. So pretty awesome that he's so into it that he's coming up with monster cards for us now. But here's the breakdown of how this card works. All right, you ready for this, Mark? All right. In Scream, you never know who the killer is going to be or who will be killed next. You play this card before your opponent sets their lineup. You pick one player from your opponent's roster to kill. Okay, kill, which effectively takes away 50% of their point total. Your opponent doesn't know which player it is and can then try. They do know that you're playing the card, but they don't know who you played the card against. So now they can try to guess and bench that player to save from losing the points. Now, if your opponent starts that player, then that player will lose 50% of their points for that week. Now, if you successfully play the card and your opponent plays the player that your Ghostface killed, then you have now earned a second and final use of this card to be played another week at your leisure. That last part's something I kind of threw at the last minute, so it's still kind of up in the air because I haven't cleared it through Coach yet, but I'm sure he'll be fine with it because looking at the card, it was only affecting one player and only 50% of their points, which is awesome, but it's not super powerful compared to most of the other cards. So I wanted to throw in that opportunity for a second usage of it to help make the card a little bit more powerful. But overall, what are your thoughts on the Ghostface Killer card?
Well, first of all, I think that late edition is perfect. It fits the card great because in a lot of the Scream movies, he gets 2 kills early on. So it fits the theme perfectly. But I just read this card before we came live, literally like minutes before we came live, and the amount of things running through my head, I love this card. Like, this is why you need to be in the Frankenstein League, just because, like, the amount of strategy that goes into with these cards, like at first I'm thinking I shouldn't be saying any of this because I don't want to spoil any game plans or stuff if I were to have this card. But like, there's so many ways to do this. Do you kill their best player, or do you not kill their best player thinking they're going to bench their best player to protect them and then kill another player on top of that? But then is that other team thinking, well, that's what you're going to do, so then I can get away with playing my best player? It just, the amount of opportunities goes around in circles. But I think this is going to be a very valuable card this year.
Yep, absolutely. Now we do have 2 more cards that I want to break later on in the episode, but a lot of people are tuning in for the consensus overall wide receiver redraft rankings, so we want to get to those. Our team rankers of myself, Mark, Coach, Nate, Wicked, and AJ, we've all compiled our top 84 wide receivers for this up and coming 2024 redraft season. We discussed the top 10, we discussed the top 12 quarterbacks and the top 25 or 28, I think it was, running backs. We've discussed the top 10 wide receivers so far, and now here we are at number 11. We're going to hopefully get through as many as we can today, but you can find the breakdown, the typed up version, for those of you that don't like podcasts as much or don't like watching YouTube for as long or don't have the time. You want to go back and read it later, or maybe you missed those episodes. It's toiletstotitles.com. Go back and check out the rankings tab, and you'll see everything that we've already done has been posted. And I don't think anything that we haven't done yet has been posted yet. We're posting these as we drop the episodes. So it's important to note also that for these rankings, we base this off of full PPR, so 1 point per reception, redraft formats. Also, Superflex, not that matters too much for only discussing wide receivers, but for those of you going back to look at the other episodes, that's good to know. Our number 11 wide receiver, so the second to last, is a guy that was in our news already, and that is Brandon Ayuk. We have him at the number 11 spot. He was 7th in receiving yards, 2nd in yards per reception, 4th in fantasy points per target, 16th in fantasy points per game, 30th in targets, 27th in snap share, 26th in deep targets, and 44th in red zone targets last season. Nate is the highest on him at 8, so he said he doesn't care about any contract or trade talks. Wicked says he cares a lot about those talks, and he's got him listed way down there at number 19. Coach and I have him right at 11, which is where his consensus average is, and AJ's right behind us at 12. Mark, you're a little bit lower, but I don't think you're unrealistically lower, especially considering he is now definitely sitting out. We don't know where the trade's going to happen if he does get traded. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you have Brandon Ayuk listed as number 16 on your list?
So last year, 4 games as a wide receiver 1, 9 total games as a wide receiver 2 or better, 7 games outside of that. San Francisco is a super high power offense, but not only does he have Debo to compete with at receiver, who scored the same amount of fantasy points as he did last year with 1 less game. He also has Kittle, who went for over 1,000 yards receiving last season. And we haven't even mentioned the number 1 player on their offense who just got the contract extension, CMC. I still think he's an awesome talent at receiver, but I think with the contract holdout and everything, this is where like the format you're playing in comes into play. Like, I still want him and have him higher from a dynasty perspective, but in redraft, I have him lower than most people do, and honestly, I'm probably gonna keep moving him down as the situation continues, because with him holding out, Juwan Jennings, they signed to a 2-year extension for $15 million. They gave CMC a contract extension, all while he's sitting out. I just don't think it's trending in the right direction for him. Like, sure, if you told me Debo was traded tomorrow and they re-signed or they gave Ayuk his extension, then I'd have him skyrocketing. But I don't see the trade happening. If anything, it's going to be him getting traded, and then we don't even know where he's going to end up, if it's a positive situation or not. So, like, I just think with all that risk there, he's a wide receiver 2 at best for me.
Yeah. Now I have him ranked 5 spots higher than you at 11. So it's not a super huge jump. Depending on your league mates, you might be able to get him at 16 just the same as you may not be able to get him at 11. So we're close enough here. We don't totally disagree, but I'm going to keep mine short because I want to talk more about the next guy on the list. But in short, really, Ayuk and Debo, they took a lot away from each other last season because, and on top of the injury issues and all that, even when they were on the field together, it just wasn't conducive in that offense to have 2 guys be a top wide receiver 1 caliber guy. So they took away a lot from each other. Now, if they do happen to pay Ayuk, he's wanting Amon-Ra St. Brown money, so he ain't getting Amon-Ra St. Brown money. But if he did, they would have to utilize him as a top wide receiver 1. They would want to. They would force feed it. So in my mind, if he does stay there with a contract extension, they're going to want to use him more, and that's going to keep him at that low-end wide receiver 1 range. If he gets traded somewhere, then he doesn't have Debo there keeping him from shining, because they're a lot of the same type of player in a lot of ways. So if he goes to a new team, there's a really good shot that he no longer has that other guy exactly a lot like him on the other side, and they can help open him up into more production. So that's kind of what I see happening. The worst case, he stays there unhappy and doesn't play, sits out, whatever. Well, then, as we get closer to the draft, to all of your redrafts, then we will adjust our rankings accordingly. But the next guy is the big one I really want to talk about. He was tied for 12th. So we're down to the last guy on our wide receiver 1 list. And we have 2 of them at wide receiver 12 because they tied. Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Cardinals, drafted 4th overall to the Cardinals. His college breakout age was 20 years old in his 2nd season with Ohio State. His 2-year average over the last 2 college seasons, and mind you, both of his last 2 years were really similar in stats, but his 2-year average was 72 catches, 1,237 yards, and 14 touchdowns. That's a weekly average of 5.8 catches, 99 yards, and 1.1 touchdowns. So he scored more than a touchdown per week on average. That would be and now this is obviously just for shits and giggles, but that would be 22.3 fantasy points per game. That would equal to the equivalent of a wide receiver 3 overall in the NFL. And obviously, it's a totally different game. I was just having fun with numbers. Wicked, being the dynasty-minded guy that he is, has him ranked as his 4th wide receiver. I think that's insane personally. Nate has him at 12. I think that might be a little low, but somewhat fair. Coach has him at 18. AJ at 11. You and I are right beside each other. You got him at 13. I got him at 14. I did a deep dive on Marvin Harrison Jr. as far as the reasons why. And after I did all this, I'm kind of thinking I might even bump him back more when we go back to redo our rankings or update our rankings here in the next couple of weeks. But here's my thoughts. Here are how both Kyler Murray and his top wide receiver has finished over the 5-year career of Kyler Murray. In 2023, his best wide receiver was Marquise Brown, 7.2 targets per game, 3.6 receptions per game, 22.8% target share. That was 9.6 fantasy points per game, 49th overall. Kyler Murray had 33.5 attempts per game. That was in 8 games. That was this past season, 2023. 2022, his best receiver was DeAndre Hopkins. So a veteran, a guy that had been there for a long time, 10.7 targets per game, 7.1 receptions per game, 29.4% target share, huge. 16.9 fantasy points per game. That was 9th overall, so really good. Kyler Murray had 35.5 attempts per game in those 11 games that he played. 2021, Christian Kirk was his number 1 wide receiver, 7.1 targets per game, 4.8 receptions per game, 20.8 target share. So that target share was a lot less in 2021 for his main wide receiver. 12.5 fantasy points per game. That's 33rd overall in fantasy points per game. Kyler Murray had 34.4 attempts per game, and he played in 14 games. In 2020, DeAndre Hopkins again was his top wide receiver. 10 targets per game, 7.2 receptions per game, 29.4% target share. So huge again, right? He has a really good receiver. He's going to target his really good receiver. So that's what we're going to expect this season. 18 fantasy points per game. That's 5th overall that season in fantasy points per game. Kyler Murray had 34.9 attempts per game, and he played in all 16 games because back then it was 16 games. In 2019, his rookie year, he had Larry Fitzgerald, Hall of Famer, 6.8 targets per game, 4.7 receptions per game, 20.6 target share, 11.1 fantasy points per game, 44th overall. Kyler Murray had 33.8 attempts per game in all 16 games. I know that one's kind of rough to compare because you had a Hall of Famer at the tail end of the last season of his career and a rookie quarterback. But really, it's more about the attempts and the target share that's making the big decision for me here. So with all that being said, let's give Murray a slight bump on his best season when it comes to attempts and say that he has 36 attempts per game. And now let's say that Harrison has slightly more targets than the best wide receiver that Murray has had to this date at 29.4% by D-Hop in 2 separate seasons. And let's say we give him a little bit of a jump and make him just a straight even 30%. It made the math easy. That's 10.8 targets per game. Okay, that would equate to just over 7 receptions per game. Now let's give him a boost there and call it 7.5 receptions per game. Last season, Puka Nacua had the best stat line for a rookie wide receiver of all time, beating out Bill Groman from 1960. Now, everyone wants to talk about these other rookie wide receivers that have happened recently, but he did do better than them. But you have to go all the way back to 1960 to see the second best rookie performance now by a wide receiver. He had 6.2 receptions per game and a 28.7 target share and ended up as the wide receiver 6 overall, talking about Puka, in a much better offense with a far better and more accurate passing quarterback. So in short, Marvin Harrison Jr. will have to have a near perfect rookie season to have Murray play at his highest level yet, and they will need to throw the ball more than Kyler has ever thrown it, just so that Marvin Harrison Jr. can finish as a top 8 wide receiver at best. I simply don't want to put all of my wide receiver 1 eggs into that basket in a redraft league, but his talent is insane, and he will come out as a clear-cut wide receiver 1 for that team. So the opportunities will definitely be there. This is why I have him more as that wide receiver 2 overall, because if you know me, you know the way I draft. I want my number 1 to be consistent, solid, and a sure bet. And then the wide receiver 2 guy is the one that you can take more of a gamble on. Whew. All right, Mark, I'll let you talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. a little bit.
Yeah. So every once in a while, you get these freaks of talent that just come out of college, and you're seeing something special. Being a Michigan fan, I watch a lot of Big Ten college football, so I've seen a lot of Marv. In particular, 7-catch, 125-yard, 1 touchdown performance, 5-catch, 118-yard performance in back-to-back years against my Wolverines. We won the game though, so it's okay. But yeah, dude's just a freak. But what I'm going to tell you, like Chase and Jetta both broke onto the scene in their rookie year, finishing as a top 5 wide receiver. And talent-wise, comparing them, there's nothing to say he can't do the same. But I have him ranked at 13, and it's not because of Marv. It's because I have very little trust in Kyler Murray. But if you told me Kyle Murray was going to play a full season, I wouldn't be shocked to see him as a top 10 receiver, top 5 even, like Wicked has him ranked. But at the same time, Murray playing a full season happens less often than the World Cup does. I wonder if Iceman will like the soccer reference there.
I'm sure he will. All right. So I have another reason for not really thinking that highly of Marvin Harrison Jr., but I'm going to save that for when we talk about Malik Neighbors. He still kind of falls into being a rookie wide receiver, falls under the same umbrella. But at the same time, if somebody's going to break that I'm about to talk about with Malik Neighbors later, it's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. So because he is talented enough, like you said, I also wouldn't be surprised. It's just not something that I want to try to risk personally.
Yeah, and again,
Drake London.
It comes down to, like we were talking about, like redraft. We've seen Kyler Murray, his injury history and missing games throughout the season. It's the risk. In redraft, you want to be more risk averse than taking a big risk like that on a top wide receiver 1,
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And then also tied for 12th is Drake London of Atlanta. He was 24th in targets, 2nd in red zone targets. So while he was kind of low end wide receiver 2 on targets, when they got into the red zone, they were trying to force feed him the ball. 2nd in red zone targets, 26th in deep targets because they couldn't really throw it deep. 30th in receiving yards at 905, and only 2 touchdowns. I'll let that sink in. He was 2nd in the league in red zone targets, but yet only had 2 touchdowns. Let's see. He had 10.9 fantasy points per game, which ended up being 42nd in points per game, and only missed 1 game, allowing him to finish as the wide receiver 37 overall. Somehow, with all those numbers, I'm still the lowest on him at 21. I was really surprised. I kind of thought that I was going to be consensus or maybe even a little high for consensus, especially after looking at all the numbers from last season. I thought, there's no way I'm going to be low on this one. And I'm really low. AJ has him at 9. Nate has him at 10. You have him at 11. Wicked at 14 and Coach at 15. So all 5 of you guys are within 6 of each other on the rankings there. Coach and I are within 6 on the low end, but Coach is still within 6 between himself and the highest ranker there. So I'm kind of a little bit surprised by that. So Mark, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with just how bad his quarterback play was last year. And that's purely what my ranking is based on. When he came out of college, he was my number 1 wide receiver in that rookie class. And like we said, he just got cursed by awful quarterback play. The fact that he had to suffer through Mariota only to have him replaced by Desmond Ridder, it's embarrassing. the fact that he could do anything with those quarterbacks is a win in my book. And Cousins, we'll see if he can stay healthy after that major injury. But if he does, that'll be a colossal improvement. So I see him shooting up the ranks this year. And I see his improvement a little higher than your 3 to 4 points per game. Doing the math, he only needs about a little under 5.5 points to get into the top 12 last year. Like if he had 5.5 points per game, I think that's achievable, especially with a good quarterback like Cousins.
Now, Cousins did not have the whole speed bridge operation that Aaron Rodgers had. He was thinking more long-term, like life after football, and went the more traditional route with his recovery. There's no guarantee that we're going to get Cousins, especially for the first half of the season. So if quarterback play is what we're really that worried about, they have Michael. I know it's not Penix, guys, but I'm always going to call him Penix because it's funny. They have Michael Penix. They have Taylor Heineke. So still probably maybe an improvement from last season, but I mean, realistically, that's my biggest scare. I don't think we see Kirk Cousins early. I think we still continue to see average at best quarterback play, and a very low upside to Drake London. I don't see him. Now, I will say he does have that third-year breakout coming to him. So if the quarterbacks are even remotely good at all, or if they have some good games, he should have big weeks, because I'm a huge firm believer in that third-year wide receiver breakout. And sometimes it happens in a fourth year. I get it, but usually it's the third year, and I totally believe in that. So there is a chance. I see the possible upside, but I don't know, just a lot of inconsistencies that scare me.
Yeah, if we're getting closer to the season and it looks like Cousins is going to be out half the year, I'm probably dropping him down. But.
Right. All right, number 14, we have Nico Collins of Houston. Guys, don't forget to stand by. We're getting closer to the next Frankenstein Monster Card announcement. But Nico Collins, 24th in targets, 26th in deep targets, and 22nd in red zone targets. He has somehow still finished. He still had 8 touchdowns, 8th most receiving yards at 1297. And he had 17.4 fantasy points per game, which is 7th in the league in fantasy points per game from last season. And he played in 15 games, finishing as the wide receiver 12 overall. Let's see. I have him listed still as the wide receiver 12 for this up and coming season as well. Coach and AJ were the closest on the consensus of 14. Coach at 13, AJ at 15. Nate has him at 17, so we're all right there together. Wicked was a little bit higher, or I mean not higher, a little bit lower at 21 overall, and then you're a little bit higher than the consensus at 9 overall. So he has a very wide range of possible outcomes here based on the 6 of us, really. So I'll go first on this one. I have him ranked where he finished overall last season. I do think he loses targets and has a small touchdown regression. However, I feel that that gets kind of balanced out by playing a full season, because he did miss 2 games, but also he's going to be facing weaker defensive backs, in my opinion, especially with Diggs coming on. If Diggs comes on and takes a lot of that top-end defensive back coverage, that's going to help free up Nico Collins a little bit more. So even though you might see fewer targets, hopefully that'll help him be even more efficient. Let's see. 12 may be just a bit high, but his consistency makes him a guy that I want to trust as a wide receiver 1, because he was consistently good. And I feel like even with Diggs there, he's still going to consistently get you numbers. And that consistency is always what's going to ring heavy in my brain for wide receiver 1. That's why I put him in there at that tail end, wide receiver 1 at the 12 spot. But what do you think, Mark? What about Nico? Nico.
So talk about a third-year breakout, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, third-year breakouts seem to be a thing of the past almost, but they're popping a lot sooner these days. You know, they are a lot sooner. But I think for Nico,
like who? Like who?
What's that?
Like who? Because Puka had a huge rookie season, You wait till his third year.
Yeah. What I was going to say was I think Nico, it was more about getting him a quarterback. CJ Stroud is just another one of those freaks that come around once in a while. But I love Nico back when he played at Michigan. Even there, he only had Shea Patterson throwing him the ball. He still managed under 800 or just under 800 yards and 7 touchdowns this final season. By the way, do you know where Shea Patterson is now, Justin? What he's doing right now? He's a quarterback.
An accountant somewhere.
He's a quarterback for the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the CFL. I Googled him before the show. I just had to add that when I saw the name of the team. I wanted to say it.
Good for you, Shay.
But back to Nico, where some people might feel the additions to the team will hurt his reps. I see it as a net positive, like kind of like you were talking about. You have Diggs and Mixon joining the group. Like you were saying, Diggs, I feel, will draw a lot of the top D-backs in coverage just based on name value, where Nico saw a lot of them last year. Mixon, now, I think undoubtedly he's going to steal some of the touchdowns from the passing game, but I think his presence is also going to force defenses to respect the run in the red zone, which you really didn't have before. So that's going to open up some more opportunities as well. I think the offense will be good enough to produce 2 wide receivers, and we all know Diggs falls off the second half of the season, so more opportunities for Collins.
Yeah, the last 2 seasons in a row, actually. And I had, I think I have more on Diggs later on with one of the other receivers we're going to be talking about. But for now, DJ Moore is our 15th wide receiver, 5th in deep targets, 14th in targets, 6th in receiving yards with 1,364 and 9 total touchdowns, 12th in receptions with 96. He played in every game last season, finishing with 16.9 points per game. That was 9th in points per game, and as the wide receiver 6 overall. Now, obviously, a lot has changed. New quarterback, a couple of new other options at wide receiver joining the team. Last season, the Bears had the 5th fewest passing attempts in the league. This isn't exactly because they were up by a lot and didn't need to pass. It's because their quarterback play was a detriment to their passing game. While Caleb Williams can run, he has worked pretty hard the last couple of off seasons to try and stay in the pocket as long as possible. This season, he will have 3 amazing targets. There is an absolute room for at least 75 more targets in that offense. That would put them in the middle of the league at 17th in passing attempts, and that's still not a lot. So there are also 85 targets to other wide receivers on the Bears last season that aren't with the team anymore. That's a total of 160 targets to split between the aging Keenan Allen, who was getting 150 targets a season because the Chargers are consistently one of the most pass-heavy offenses every single year, and then a rookie wide receiver in Odunze. So that's 150 targets to split between the 2 of them. I don't think that's enough, obviously. I think 160 targets to split between those 2, and I don't think that's enough. But now, even if Moore loses another, let's say, 20 targets from the new look offense, that's only a total of 42.2 points according to his points per target. So he would be losing 42.2 points. He still wouldn't or would have been the wide receiver 15 last season, which would be a very reasonable ranking and probably why we have him as our 15th overall consensus. However, we see it often enough that when there are 3 great wide receiver options and they're all joined together, they all get 1,000 yards or they all get really close to 1,000 yards. They all get 10 touchdowns or really close to 10 touchdowns, and they all get almost 100 receptions or more. And if they don't, then that means that we have 3, or that means we don't have 3 great wide receivers. So if they're not all getting that, then most likely what's happening is Odunze, as a rookie, needed a little more time, or Keenan, as the old guy, is losing his step. But DJ Moore is going to be the consistent guy. DJ Moore has the stability. He's still young enough. He's still got game. He's still fast. He's still going to get his. And that's why, in my mind, I have him listed as the 8th wide receiver, which is considerably higher than the consensus. The next one on the list was Coach at 12, Nate at 14. Mark, you and AJ both have him at 18, and then Wicked was the lowest at 20th. So, Mark, obviously, we're opposite ends of this, and you're a lot closer to the consensus. So, what am I missing here?
Okay. So, I got to start off by saying this, because after your glaring recommendation for DJ Moore, it's going to sound like I'm completely bashing him, which I'm not. Because DJ Moore is one of the most consistent wide receivers in the game today. He's only had 2 seasons in his career under 1,000 yards and was phenomenal last year, finishing as the number 6 overall wide receiver. Now, with that being said, last year is the only year he's finished as a wide receiver number 1. On top of that, everywhere he's been, he's always been the primary option. The best wide receiver he's played with throughout his whole career was Curtis Samuel. Now I'm supposed to believe that he's going to continue from last year with a rookie quarterback when they just added a stud rookie wide receiver, and then Keenan Allen, who's a target hound in his own. Nah, not for me. But I still have him as a wide receiver too at 18, which I think is more than fair.
Right on, right on. Yeah, the big difference there in those seasons where he wasn't a wide receiver 1 and the last season when he was is touchdowns. That was really the biggest. His yards have always been there. His air yards have always been there. His targets have always been there. Receptions, there was only one season that they weren't there, and he missed 2 games. So, 1 game that year. So probably would have still been a little bit low on receptions one of those years. It's always been touchdowns. That's what's been really his Achilles heel. So as long as he gets those touchdowns, I'm not going to look like an idiot, and that's all that matters. DJ Moore, get the touchdown so I don't look like an idiot. All right. Let's see. Number 16, I'm going to make this one quick, and then we're going to get to that next Frankenstein monster card reveal. Number 16, Michael Pittman, 9th in targets last season, 4th in target share, and 9th in red zone targets, 4th in receptions with 109, 513 yards after the catch, which was 10th, and 14th in receiving yards with 1,152. He was 14th in fantasy points per game at 15.6 and played in 16 games, finishing overall as the wide receiver 13. Let's see, Mark, you're the highest on him at 12. So here in a second, I'm going to let you talk about him first. Wicked is the lowest at 25. Nate has him at 13, Coach at 14, and then myself and AJ are right there at pretty much at the consensus. We have him at 17, where the consensus ranks have him at 16. I'm going to keep mine short on him because you guys all know how I feel about Anthony Richardson. If you don't, then go back and watch the Colts offseason breakdown episode. I recorded it last night with my man Cody Felger from Bring the Juice podcast, based right here out of Indianapolis. They do great work with the Colts, and that's pretty much all they focus on are the Indianapolis Colts. They know that team inside and out. You definitely want to watch that breakdown. But we discussed Michael Pittman. We discussed my concerns with Anthony Richardson. And, of course, you guys can see my write-up on this on the website, toiletstotitles.com. But, Mark, I'm going to let you talk about Pittman, and then we're going to get into that Frank breakdown.
So Michael Pittman's one of my favorite wide receivers to watch right now. He commands the ball. He almost reminds me a little bit of Larry Fitzgerald. But so outside of his rookie year where he only played 13 games, he's been under 1,000 yards just once out of those 3 years and he had 925 yards that year. Where he lacks is kind of what you were talking about with DJ Moore is touchdowns. So like his high season for touchdowns is 6, but last year he played with Gardner Minshew for most of the season, and you could argue that's probably the best quarterback that he's played with because the other 2 were Wentz and Ryan on the wrong sides of their career. Now we have Richardson. like you said, the question is, will he get hurt again? Will he be able to stay healthy? But I think if he does stay healthy, his ability to elevate Pittman's game is so high. And one of Pittman's best games last year was the first game of the season with Richardson, where he had 97 yards, 8 receptions on 11 targets, and one of his only 4 touchdowns on the season. So I think if he can get a season where Richardson can play, the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he finishes higher than the wide receiver 12 if Richardson stays healthy.
I do got to ask you, though, if Richardson stays healthy as a Colts fan, will you be able to enjoy it?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you mean?
Okay.
Of course I will.
We just hear week after week, there's no chance.
Oh, yeah, no.
I just didn't know if you would be on
I'm never
for him.
I am never, ever, because we are really like giving people every time we have $1, we give away $2. I'm never going to be a millionaire. It's never going to happen. But if it did, I'd be excited. I'd be super happy. I'd be stoked. So yeah, sure. Bring it on, Anthony Richardson. Be happy, be healthy, play football, make Michael Pittman be the stud that he is, and I'm going to love you for it. I mean, I have nothing against the guy. I hope he stays healthy.
I get it.
But hey, Cody, I see your comment here. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, ask your question. I'm going to give a little bit of a reveal for our Frankenstein Listener League now. Our second card, a second new monster card that's going to be added to the 2024 season 2024 season here. And then we'll break to the Gilded commercial. And actually, you know what? Given the news with the Gilded, I don't think we need to do a Gilded commercial right now. But anyway, the monster card reveal is one that I created. The Gremlins, Gizmo Gremlins. I like this one just because of the nostalgia. I literally had to rack my brain to come up with a way to relate Gremlins with a way to use a card in Frankenstein just to get my man Gizmo in there. But you can't feed a gremlin after midnight, right? We all know this. This is like the rule that we grew up on. Because if you do, he's going to get mad. He's going to multiply. Well, if you make a gremlin play for more than 60 minutes of football in a game, he also gets mad and multiplies. This will be a season-long card that cannot be lost. Okay, now if you draft this card, it is automatically played every single week. You don't even have to do anything about it. You maybe remind your commissioner each week, hey, don't forget to add my points. But all you do is you get to reap the rewards from this card. Any player that you have on your roster that plays in an overtime game will be added an additional 20% or an additional amount of points. It's 20% for the player that you have on your roster that plays in overtime that scored the most points. So like if you have 3 guys that all played in overtime, whichever one scored the most is going to get a 20% bonus. And all the others will get an additional 10% bonus for that week and that week alone. It is their overall points that all get multiplied, not just what they score in overtime, because I wanted to make it easier on the commissioners at least. Let's see. This also means that you will get nothing from this card on the weeks that you have no players that play in overtime. So there is that little bit of a risk in it as well. If you have an opponent with the Ghostbuster card, they may play it to prevent you from being able to use the Gremlin's ability for that week alone. But you still get to keep your card for the remaining weeks. This card is good for the Frankenstein regular season only. Just like all the monster cards are just regular season only. Now, what about that one? So there's no real strategy involved in this one, Mark.
No, it's very interesting. So a season-long card, that's very beneficial. And let's be honest, nobody with the Ghostbuster card is going to waste their card just for that week. I don't think.
Well, yeah, because they would have to play it before the week. So, you're taking a big chance.
Yeah, I don't see them wasting the card on an opportunity that players go into overtime. But I mean, that can add some significant point values to your total. You're already getting the benefit with your players going into overtime. So to get even more on top of that is huge for that 1 week. And let's be honest, when you steal a player every week you win, any week that happens, that's a huge benefit. So I like it.
And then also, nothing is changing with the playoffs as far like we're adding more to the playoffs. More teams are going to make the playoffs because we're expanding the leagues. But it's still a lot of the positions or a lot of the teams that make the playoffs are, are based off of points for on the season. So that's just extra points for all those weeks. Like maybe you only get that bonus like 6 or 8 weeks out of the year. Those all add up at the end. You might have a whole full 200-300 points extra. So
now is that regular season long or season long, like playoffs too?
No, it's just regular. The gremlin dies at the end of the last week of the regular season.
Okay.
So yeah, none of our monster cards are into the playoffs. Now your heroes are still viable in the playoffs, but
I know we originally talked about Freddie possibly like there was a little confusion on if Freddie would go to the playoffs or not, so I didn't know.
Yeah, we think unless we made it so that all of the cards could be used in the playoffs, it's kind of a disadvantage. Whoever has the ability to take the monster card first in the draft. So it was all just luck of the rock, paper, scissors competition at the start of the year. So I don't want to put that much emphasis on one major card just based off of luck. But let's see here. What else do we got? Next we have do we have nope, still no question yet from Cody. All right. We're gonna move on, Cody, and when I see your comment in there, then I'll get back to that question. But Jalen Waddle for Miami, 12th in yards after catch and second in route win rate. So Duke can run some routes. He played in 14 games, finishing with 14.2 fantasy points per game, which was 21st in points per game. So kind of low end wide receiver 2. And also the wide receiver 34 overall. Now, AJ has him at 14. Mark, Wicked, and Nate, all 3 of you guys have him at 15 and Coach at 16. So all 4 of you are all right there together at the consensus pretty much. And then I'm pretty low. I'm 10 behind Coach at 26th. Kind of feel like I'm the one that needs to explain myself here, and I'm okay with that. So last offseason, I was way low on Waddle according to ADP. And even in every single rankings list that I saw anywhere, I was way lower on him in my rankings on a points per game basis at 21st. He ended the season last year, the points per game basis at 21st. So that was a low end wide receiver 2. That isn't even the reason I don't like the guy for fantasy purposes. The reason I don't like him is because of his inconsistency. He is heavily quarterback dependent, as his stats plummeted when Tua isn't playing. But even with Tua in the game, he couldn't put together consecutive good games, and he's also heavily touchdown dependent. This was proven last season as Tua played every game. And here was Waddle's week by week finishes. Okay, weeks 1 through 4, he missed one game, so we can throw out that was week 3. But with the other 3, he had a game as the wide receiver 3 or as a wide receiver 3. Okay, so he was 31st overall, so he was a wide receiver 3 that week. And 2 unstartable weeks. When I say unstartable, I mean he was way back there. He was like wide receiver. It would be 37 or worse because that's wide receiver 4 on your fantasy roster. So that's not startable because you're starting 2, maybe 3. You get a flex. It's not really startable if they're scoring wide receiver 4 numbers. So 2 of the first 4 weeks he was unstartable. In weeks 5 and 6, he was a wide receiver 2 both weeks. So in that 13 to 24 range. In week 7, he was a wide receiver 3 again. In week 8, he finally had a good game as a wide receiver 1. Week 9, he was unstartable again. And then the bye week. And then week 11, wide receiver 3, 36th overall. So he's actually in one spot away from being unstartable by my numbers. Week 12, wide receiver 2. Week 13, the last wide receiver 3 on the list again at 36. So again, only one spot away from being unstartable. Like talking like half a point here. Week 14, wide receiver 2 again. Now week 15, he finally had another good week where he was with his first great finish of the week or of the season in 1 week of the entire season, and that was as the wide receiver 2 overall. And then in week 16, he was unstartable again. So, in fact, over his entire 3-year career, the only thing consistent about his game is that he has flashes, but overall, he's just really bad for fantasy football, and he's really inconsistent. But anyway, I also kind of took a shot there in my write-up for guys that want to go high on him, and I'll leave that for the reading on toiletstotitles.com. But again, all of the stuff that I'm saying now is all the same stuff I was saying before last season, and nobody was listening to me. And I didn't have him on any of my rosters, and I was pretty happy about it. Like, it's this guy, okay, with fantasy football, you want to go with what you know. And all too often, we don't know. All too often, there's way too many questions. But with Waddle, we know. We've seen it. Don't let it bite you again, guys. All right. So I'll get off my soapbox and I'll let you slap me around a little bit here, Mark.
Ooh-wee. You didn't take the shot that you had on the write-up, which was about his touchdown celebration, because I was going to ask you if you had a penguin phobia, because you were really upset about that, it seemed like. But the one thing I'll say is
before you, all right. So if
Okay.
you're going to bring it up, all right. The only reason I say that is because I feel like that flash, that big play, that occasional, I'm awesome, and then he does his little waddle, and it gets everybody excited. Like, I like the celebration, whatever, do your thing, bring attention to yourself, because that's what's going to make you the bank. And when it comes to the players, it's all I care about. I want to see you make some money, but I feel like too many people put too much fantasy stock into that flash and into those celebrations, and we don't look at the real numbers. That was where I was going with that.
Okay, so the one thing I'll say is you're spot on with the consistency issue. He does have flashes up, flashes, bad games, and yeah. But to say really bad for fantasy football when he was the 8th overall wide receiver the year before and the 13th overall wide receiver the year before that, I don't understand how he can be bad for fantasy football. And let's be fair with the injuries last year. The points per game thing doesn't always factor in when they get injured during the game, because they're counting those games. So if they leave a game early and you have a low score in that game, that's going to be factored into your overall. So last year he missed 3 games and finished 33 overall. And his total fantasy points were 202 points, which was only 47.
You're saying he missed 3 games if you take away those games he was injured in, right? Because he actually played in all 17 games last year. Oh, wait. No, you're saying 23. My bad. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was like I could barely hear you there. It like cut out. Like,
you're good.
Okay.
I should have never said anything anyway, because I was looking at something different. You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So last year when he missed 3 games, he finished 33 overall, and his total fantasy points were 202. That was only 47 points behind Debo, who was the 15th ranked wide receiver with 249 points. So if we were to say he stayed healthy for the entire season, over those 3 games, he would have needed like 15 points a game to make up that 47 points. I think his points per game were, what'd you say, were like 14 point something on the year?
Yeah. 14.2 points per game.
Yeah. So he's got a point to make up to get there. So, but also you have the added benefit when you're drafting Waddle as a wide receiver too, is the huge ceiling if Tyreek were to go down. That only puts him way higher if that were to happen.
Okay. So here's the thing. So you mentioned you went back to his 2022 season and said, how is he not good for fantasy purposes? Because he finished as the wide receiver 8 overall. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the reason why, is because that season he had 8 games where he didn't even finish as a wide receiver 2. And you had to start him because you drafted him high. He was in your starting lineup. You had to start him, and you weren't getting fantasy points for him those 8 weeks. there were 6 of those weeks where he wasn't even startable by meaning that he was a wide receiver 4 or worse. And most of those weeks was a lot worse, where he was wide receiver 76, wide receiver 60, wide receiver 97, wide receiver 69. Like, how is that good for fantasy football is what I ask. So that's why he's bad for fantasy football. Like, the overall end of the year, sure, yeah, he did well for your points for on the season, but he may have gotten you enough losses throughout the season that you didn't even make the playoffs. So so all those points where he did blow up wasn't worth it anyway, because we're here for championships. We're not here for good weeks, right?
Oh.
So that's how I pictured that end of it. And then on the other end, you mentioned something about if Tyreek should happen to go down. I didn't put these numbers together because I didn't even think about that, because I'm so low on Waddle. I can possibly do that for you for next week. But I did do a write-up on him last offseason, and the splits when he is with and without Tyreek, he does so much better when Tyreek is on the field, because Tyreek takes that best coverage. I don't think that Waddle is that good of a wide receiver, to be honest with you. I'm just going to straight up say it. I don't think that he's a very good football player. And whenever he's faced with that number 1 defensive coverage, he folds like a lawn chair. So, in my opinion, I'm just avoiding him altogether. And the best way for me to do that in my rankings is to have him listed all the way down at the wide receiver 26, because I know I'm not going to get him there. If I do get him there, then that's, a high-end wide receiver 3. Then I'm okay with starting him every week as a wide receiver 3, because he's going to get you those wide receiver 1 points, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the only thing I'll say to counter your first part of that argument with how many weeks he's unstartable and stuff, I mean, we were just talking about the Frank League, how a lot of teams make playoffs based on points for the season.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of leagues that have that. So, I mean, where he's finishing at the end of the season does matter. And if he's that bad in all those weeks that you mentioned, that means to be the 8th receiver, he had to clear out win you weeks in the other on the other side of the spectrum. So
yeah, he absolutely did. He had a wide receiver 3 overall, 4 overall, 7 overall, 5 overall. So he had pretty much just as many single-digit finishes as he did 60-plus finishes. So you're right. Like, best ball leagues, go for it. Like, I'm not going to have him listed this low on best ball leagues, though. You know what I mean? Like it does change my rankings if we're considering something like that. But so this is based off of your traditional super flex. But again, change everything that Mark or I say to fit what you need for your fantasy league. Absolutely. That's a great point. Let's see. Mike Evans, number 18. Kind of excited about this one because I had him listed as the consensus at 18, and I kind of thought that maybe I was a little bit low on him. So I see hope where I might actually be able to get him on my team a little bit more this season. He was first in deep targets last season, second in total touchdowns with 13, ninth in receiving yards with 1,255, and ninth in routes won. So even at his age, which is 30 plus, he's still winning routes like the young guys. So Evans played in every game last season, averaging 16.6 points per game and ending as the overall season ending wide receiver 7 overall last season. So Mike Evans, so I had him at 18 where he's consensus. You, Mark, and Coach, both of you guys had him right there with me at 17. And AJ and Nate both had him at 16. So all 5 of us are right there together. And then Wicked, being the dynasty-minded guy, he's 30-plus years old and puts him all the way down at 26. So he's pretty low on him. So here's my thing on Mike Evans. He's finished as a wide receiver 16 or better in points per game each of his last 6 years, regardless of the quarterback, regardless of the coaching staff or his fellow wide receivers. None of that mattered. Why would anything change now? And it's another year in the offense for Baker Mayfield. And I get, he's 30 years old, but in my mind, that just means you get him at the 30-year-old discount. People are getting lower on him because of his age, and he is going to hit that cliff eventually. But as a wide receiver 2, again, this is where you're taking your chances, and you're going to take the chance that he's not going to hit that age cliff just yet. He should be steady and consistent low-end wide receiver 1 to a mid-range wide receiver 2 nearly each and every single week. This is one of those rare chances where you get to take a chance on a guy as your wide receiver 2, and I put that in quotations because I don't think it's that much of a chance, but then yet he's still gonna be consistent. So this is kinda like the perfect wide receiver 2, situation in my mind. Anything to add to that, Mark?
No, I mean, you're 100% correct. I don't really have much to say about Big Mike. It's just like DJ Moore, he's a model of consistency. I think he's about as sure thing as a top end wide receiver 2 as you're going to get. I don't think he has the ceiling as a lot of other guys, but he's going to get you 1,000 yards every single year.
Right on. All right, we're going to try to rush through these next two, number 19 and 20, and get to this third Frankenstank card announcement. Let's see. Stephon Diggs is who we have at 19. So I don't know, for those of you keeping track at home, we've already talked about the other two. So even as a consensus, I believe we have Stephon Diggs as the third best wide receiver on the list. Am I right or am I wrong about that? I'll let Nico and didn't we talk about one yesterday?
Was Tank up there?
Actually, let me.
I don't know.
Or not yesterday, last week. Oh, no. I'm wrong. We have Tank Dell down at 27. Oh, what I meant to say is that I personally have Stephon Diggs as my worst of the three on their own roster. So again, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on that because we're kind of pushing time here. But Wicked has Stephon ranked as 11th. And he's the highest. AJ is the lowest at 26. Mark, you have him at 14. Coach is right on consensus at 19. Nate's just behind that at 21, and I'm just behind that at 24. So I'm not too far behind consensus, even though I have Diggs as the third best wide receiver on that team, because I think that they're all going to be able to eat this season pretty much. It's kind of what it comes down to. For me, but do you have anything to add on Diggs? I will say, though, I do have a much kind of bigger write-up on Diggs. I just don't have time to read it all right now. So, again, it should be posted the next couple of days. You go back to toiletstitles.com and read the write-up on all of the different players that we're putting out here for the entire redraft season here. But do you have anything you want to talk about with Diggs specifically?
So the only thing I was going to say about Diggs is usually when you're leaving – a quarterback like Josh Allen, that can hurt you, right? But he gets to go play with CJ, so I don't think the drop-off's that far. But the only reason I have him at 14 is because I figured out the Stephon Diggs formula. Draft him high, reap the benefits for 6 weeks, and then trade him. trade him.
Yeah, my only concern about that is maybe Houston knows what they're getting with him and they've seen it themselves. And really what typically happens is at the halfway mark when the Bills are losing football, actual NFL games, because they're trying to force feed Diggs the ball, they realize, hey, maybe if we start getting some of these other guys the ball, it'll be more efficient. We can move down the field. We can start winning football games again. And that's what they started doing. And they started winning. And they did that 2 years in a row. So that's kind of another reason why I'm kind of off of Diggs a little bit compared to the other guys is I think it's going to be more of an equal share. I think Diggs will have his games. I think they'll all have their games. But I definitely like the way you're thinking because that's what I was thinking I was going to do with him if he stayed in Buffalo was try to draft him early. And now if he follows the same pattern, then you're gonna hit gold with him midseason. But
the only thing I want to add, I'm interested to see is like Allen's more of a scrambling quarterback. He's gonna bounce around all over the place and then chuck. Yeah. So like I'm interested to see how Diggs works with. I mean, CJ can move around, but he's gonna be more of your pocket passer. So like, does that benefit or does that take away from him? Maybe it helps Diggs out where he's able to run his routes and not have to worry about scrambling to get open for Josh Allen.
So he's been with Buffalo for 4 years now. So maybe we go back to 2019 and see who the quarterback was there in Minnesota. I
Yeah,
don't think Cousins was there yet, was he?
I don't think so.
Maybe he was. Maybe for the tail end, or for the tail end of Diggs' career there. But regardless, so maybe that's something you can do. You know, if you're watching this show, that brings up a great point. You can go back and look and see who his quarterback was and see how he fared with more of a pocket passer in Minnesota, if he did have one there. But next up, we got number 20, Amari Cooper, 20th in targets and 6th in deep targets, 31st in red zone targets with only 5 total touchdowns, 10th in receiving yards with 1,250 on only 72 receptions. So pretty low on the receptions, but still had 1,250 yards. He had 15.1 fantasy points per game, 17th in fantasy points per game. And he played in 15 games, finishing as the wide receiver 20 overall. I have him at consensus at 20. Nate is right in front of me at 19. Coach is right behind me at 21. The highest is Wicked at 18. The lowest is AJ at 26. Mark, you have him at 25, so you're next to the lowest there, but you and I are within 5 here. I mean, when I was going through and doing my rankings, I had him fluctuated anywhere between about 17 to 23, 24. So, like, we're pretty much right there together. But I have Amari ranked right at the average consensus for me. This is the perfect spot for him. Draft him after you have taken a more solid and consistent wide receiver one, or after 2 or 3 running backs. He provides the upside possibilities, and you still have to hope that the human predator, Deshaun Watson, will somehow be great. I don't. We don't know that he's going to be great like ever again. But if that happens, then the risk will pay off. However, because of the inconsistency, you will want to follow this pickup with another more consistent wide receiver within the next couple of rounds. Again, I'm saying if you take him as your wide receiver 2, and because there is inconsistency there, this is where you take the risk. If Watson shows up, then you got the ability to possibly get a wide receiver 1 out of the deal. If he doesn't, then he's still going to have big games. But it's inconsistent enough that maybe you follow that up with your 3rd wide receiver pretty quickly. That's kind of a quick synopsis there. But Mark, do you have anything to add on Amari Cooper before I get to the 3rd card announcement?
So the reason I'm low on Cooper, I love Cooper. I think he's a stud. He's getting older, yeah, sure. But what he did with Flacco last year was awesome. I said Flacco. No, but I worry about Watson. Like I just don't know what he's gonna give us. I would almost be apt to put him higher if I knew Watson got hurt and was out, because you got Jameis Winston behind him, right? He's just gonna chuck the ball all day long. But yeah. I don't know. Watson's struggling, and how many games is he just gonna not do anything? I don't know. That's why I have him low. But other than that, I love Cooper.
Yeah. The more time that Watson gets hurt, the more time he gets to spend on the massage table. All right. The 3rd card is this is another one that I thought long and hard about. I wanted to find a way to incorporate this one. I even named it the wrong thing. I believe I started off naming this as the Crow. And Coach read through it, and he said, dude, the Crow is kind of a good guy. Like, do we want a monster card for the Crow? And then he said, how about the Birds? And then it makes sense. It's perfect because, you know, Alfred Hitchcock needs to be represented in the Frankenstein. So the Birds is the name of this card. And this card could affect – this is the first time that this has happened. This is a card that's going to affect more than just your game. This card could affect every single team within your division, including your own team. When you play this card, any player that plays on a team that has a bird as their team name, so the Ravens, the Eagles, the Falcons, Cardinals, and Seahawks, those 5 teams, if they have a bird as their team name, then and whatever team in your division puts that player in their starting lineup, including your own team, you will get an additional 20% added to those players' points, except for the opponent of the person that plays the card. That person will lose 20% for those particular players that play on those 5 teams in their starting lineup. The Ghostbuster card can only affect the use of this card if it is played by the opponent you are facing that week if you're the one that played the card. Ghostbuster cannot be played against you if it's on a team that you're not facing that week. So you could have the Ghostbuster card. Mark and I could be playing each other, and I could have the Ghostbuster card, and then we got Coach over here in our division in a totally another game, totally separate, has nothing to do with our game, and he chooses to play the Birds card, and it causes Mark to get more bonus points for his Bird players than mine, and I go from winning that week to losing. I can't even play my Ghostbuster against it. So pretty wild card in that it affects every team in your division. So what do you think about that one?
Very interesting card. I like the fact how it affects multiple teams. From my personal standpoint, I probably won't draft the card just because I don't. With like you mentioned before, teams making the playoffs on points. I don't like playing a monster card that could benefit other teams and help against me. And the other problem, if I drafted this card, I would feel like I'm forcing myself to draft all these birds throughout the draft.
Yep.
Like I'd be reaching on all of these players. So like, not only would you have to draft the card early, then you have to draft all their players early to benefit from it. But yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting card.
There's another angle too. Like, let's say you're trying to fight for that number one spot in your division, or let's say you're a few games back or whatever, or maybe there's the next team that's ahead of you in the rankings, one or two spots ahead of you in the rankings. They have not very many Bird players in their starting lineup, but they're playing against a weaker opponent that does. So maybe you play it that week.
True.
Maybe you win, maybe you don't, but maybe you're doing it to prevent them from winning as well, so that they could lose a player. Or maybe the guy you play next week, you want to see him lose this week, and you think that playing this card will help him lose so that he'll lose a player and you'll have the opportunity to win next week. So still a lot of strategy in this one. Hey, what's up? What's up, Rich? How's it going, buddy?
Rich.
Rich popping in reminds me, guys. This Saturday was supposed to be the next Fun Day draft show. I got a bartending gig. I haven't bartended in years, but I'm coming out of retirement for some friends of ours. So I'm going to bartend this weekend on Saturday. So Sunday night will be the Fun Day draft show. That's this coming Sunday night. I think we're still going to shoot for 9 p.m. Eastern. I haven't heard from everybody in that group chat just yet, but that's what we're going to shoot for. So Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And Rich, if you haven't checked the chat, then that's news to you too. But thanks for being flexible. All right.
What's the draft?
Go ahead.
The category.
Oh, okay. So the last Fun Day draft, we did our favorite dinner guests. So we drafted a bunch of people that we would have over for dinner. Yeah, of course, Rich. And I mean, it could be anybody, dead, alive, real, fake, doesn't matter. So this time we're drafting the dinner. We're going to draft what we're going to serve at this dinner. So you draft one soup, one appetizer, a main course, a couple of sides. You're going to choose a drink and a dessert, and then a wild card that can be pretty much anything. So we're throwing together the dinner this Sunday night. So that'll be good fun.
Nice.
So, and again, Mark, you're always welcome if you ever want to join one of those drafts. So,
I do want to jump on sometime. Dinner's probably not the best one for me because I've very limited. I'm a chicken guy. That's about it. All I eat. So, my draft would be very simple.
Well, your first draft with us, you'll have the 101, just so you know. I always let the first timers get the 101. So, I mean, you can have chicken this week. All right. All right, guys. So we've gone through the next 10 on our list. I'm going to leave it there because we are already pushing an hour 20 right now. Plus, the next one is a big one. The next one, I'm just going to go ahead and tease it. It's number 21 is Malik Neighbors. So that's that other rookie that I was talking about. I've got a nice little decent write-up on this one that I'm excited about reading. So I definitely want to get to that one, and I want to spend time on it. So we'll go over that. We'll kick off next week's episode with the wide receiver 21 in our rankings. And who knows, hopefully finish up wide receivers, but there's a lot I want to talk about this year. We might even do 2 more episodes on wide receivers. I'm not really sure, but we'll figure it out. And hopefully we can get Wicked on with us whenever we get to T. Higgins, but who knows how long that's going to take. He's way back there. All right, Mark, man, we appreciate you coming on again. You've been a rock during this time with Coach taking time off, man. You have no idea how much I appreciate your work. Yeah, Rich, that's right. That's right. And this is a consensus of all of us, all 6 of us. So, yep. It's all for good reason, though. You can find out next week, Rich, or just shoot me a DM at JustinFF_, or for you can text me. All right. Everybody have a great night. We appreciate you tuning in.